Hello everybody, welcome to another video. I have to be very careful with Q&As now because it doesn't matter where I look, there are a million people asking a million questions and I could get way too many. So today we're going to be talking once again exclusively about Heart of Thorns. That could be the way the Q&As go for a while, just a heads up on that, but I'm sure many of you guys will be happy to hear such a thing. So let's jump in. The first one comes from Segman. Now most of these questions I've pulled from the more recent videos I've done, specifically stuff after packs, because let's be honest, questions asked about Heart of Thorns before packs came around probably have been answered in some way or aren't really relevant anymore. Segment asked and said, have you noticed in the trailer that the Masat are shining with different colours? We have a red one to the left, the blue one is to the right, and in the center, more forwards to the players, is the green one. Lazarus the Dyer is back, because the only reason they glow different is the glowing represents their professions, and if this is true, does it mean that the blue Messiah is a monk? They're the caster's only race, for what we know about them, and can't tell if they evolved their professions the same way other Tyrians did, which makes sense to suspect the blue can be the second to last monk interior. I think maybe you're getting a little bit wild with the monk idea, but this tinting of their colors is interesting to me. It's interesting because later on in the trailer also we see a further Masat, a very serpentine looking Masat, one we'll discuss in the very next question, who doesn't have like this color to them. And I think what they're doing here is they're showing us that these are very important Masat, these are very specific Masat, and how do we differentiate them, right? Look at their design, they've got these ugly ass masks in front of their face, they are filled with arcane energies, we can barely see them for all the animations and so forth. So, to give us that easy recognition of who's who, I think they have this kind of aura about them, yes, this coloured aura. And for those of you who never played Guild 1, champions, I guess, is the best equivalent. In the first game, you would find bosses around, you know, very powerful enemies that you could fight. And if an enemy was a boss, they would enjoy like a coloured shining aura around their bodies, like a filter that would be applied to them, and this colour changed depending on their professions. So if you were fighting against a Mesmer boss in the first game, they would be shimmering purple. If you were fighting against a monk boss, they would be shimmering blue. And of course the Masat were a big thing at the game at launch, and when the Warring Kryta came around and we saw the very last of the Masat we were interacting with, every single Masat that appeared to us fighting against the Shining Blade with their last breath, hoping that the White Mantle could remain in control. As we saw these last Masat, they were all incredibly powerful bosses and once again had these auras. So, the idea now is that maybe you can look at the Masat colours here and peg them back to Masat bosses from Gw1. Problem there though is usually if you saw a boss that had an aura like that, we kind of killed that character. Lazarus is like one of the only ones that actually survived. I think someone did run off in Warring Cry. I could be terribly mistaken with that, but something in the back of my mind is telling me about a Masat there also. But a further complication with the Lazarus thing is that he changed his class too. I believe for a while he was a Necro and then he became a monk or something like that. So it's hard to point them as, you know, characters we've seen before, but it certainly does mean that when this expansion drops, we have more of a reason to, like, differentiate between them, and that's cool to me. That means that these guys could be talking to us a lot, interacting with us a lot, fighting by our sides, and then maybe against us too in the end. We shall have to see. It's very exciting to me, the whole Masat thing, that of all the ancient races that have fallen, the Masat are the ones that we may end up coming back and end up allying with us, you know, perhaps repenting for their past mistakes. Maybe they'll still be snakes and stab us in the back again because this is the race we're dealing with. That's so cool to me. Alright, so the next question is still on the Masat. This is from Corvus this time. He says, the Masat at the very end looks so serpentine. Also, I can see in her wings. Could it be possible that they've somehow lost their grace or power and are slowly a recovering race? Another reason to form an alliance with the other races of Tyria if they're weak. Could be why some of them might have lost their wings. It's an interesting idea. I think that a lot of this will just come down to the fact that they're trying to update the design of the Masat coming forward into the new game. But I do also think that if you were a designer and you were looking at this cool like race that you'd created in the previous game, you're like, right, we've got this old version, let's make it look better. Surely you're going to take their key features and accentuate them. And to me, there are three things that are incredibly key features of a Masat. Number one is they're very golden, elegant appearance. You know, they're very humanoid shape, they're long, kind of alien appearance. That's one. Number 2 is the way that they float around and, you know, hardly move anything except their arms, and they're floating in this very bizarre, interesting way. And number 3 is their wings. Come on, their wings were huge. And they were really interesting looking wings too. You know, these kind of black spindles winding around behind them. And I'm not saying that they've got rid of the wings. Obviously they haven't. It's just they took that design and really changed it a lot. And you're right, there is a Messart we see here, super serpentine. If you guys watch our reactions on the stream we did, where we were watching the trailer live talking about things, I was desperately trying to not talk too much, but when that Messart came up at the end, which I now do believe it is, at first I was like, oh, that's a toxic crate. I thought we were going to be seeing, you know, something going on with why Scarlet built the tower and all that stuff. But no, I think it's a Messart now, and it just looks crazy, crazy, crazy serpentine. And that's very curious to me that they played with the design so much. Is that going to be a part of a story? Are there justifications for this? Is it because they are a damaged, weak race? We really don't know. We haven't been to the Isles of Janthir. We haven't been to necessarily anywhere we once knew the centers of their civilization once were. We know that most of their race escaped from Tyria. They were just like, screw it, I'm just going to leave at some point. And yeah, we killed many other ones on Tyria, but how strong they are, I don't know. Are they just going to be in the story because, oh look, we're around their ruins and stuff? Surely they have a reason for coming back to us, right? And do we still have to be ascended to see them, or are they just making themselves visible to us? And again, this may be something that many Guild Wars 2 players, especially in light of this trailer, miss, but a huge part of the Messart was their invisibility, okay? They were known to many as just the unseen ones. They were the Messart, but for the White Mantle and the populace of Kryta who they were controlling, they just saw them as unseen gods, guys. They threw away their pantheon of the Dwayne, Lister, and so forth, and they just had the unseen ones. They never revealed themselves to anyone. For one brief split moment, they revealed themselves, kidnapped Saul D'Alessio, and then slaughtered many of their followers, leaving only 3 people alive. And those were their 3 most devoted of followers, who then went and described their appearance and so off, presumably. But we never saw them very much at all, not until we ascended. It was only after we ascended that Glint said, hey, look, this is what's going on, and we learned more about this, and we finally started interacting with them in the Shiver Peaks, and then later on in the War in Kryta and so forth. So, yeah, it's interesting to me that they're revealing themselves to us. It seems like one of those situations where if they didn't want to reveal themselves to us, and they didn't want this alliance somehow, then they wouldn't give it to us. Maybe they just feel threatened because Mordramoth is suddenly pushing out a lot. And we, of course, have the White Mantle activity too. And again, I just mentioned Saul too for a second there. Jesus, like, could Saul be coming back? What does this mean for the humans back in Divinity's Reach if the White Mantle ended up being right? And the Messart are still about. And they're kind of good guys, too. You know, they could go in so many places. I really hope the quality of the story with this expansion is as strong as it could be. Okay, moving on. Tickle Dork says, remember the April 1st Fool's joke about the Commando class? What if that's the advanced class for engineers? ArenaNet seems to take ideas from the past and put them in. Yeah, okay, maybe not. Actually, a lot of people asked me, I used some footage of the Commando in one of the recent videos. A lot of people saying, whoa, what the hell is this? For those who don't know, April Fools, just before Guild Wars 2 came out, we were sort of all riding the hype train for the actual release of the game, and they were slowly portioning out information to us in the way of profession reveals. And I think we had the Engineer and the Mesmer only left to be announced. The Mesmer was the last one they ended up doing, and the Engineer was just before the Mesmer. But, so I believe this was where we were at this time. And people were kind of expecting some kind of, like, mechy-ish tune to be one of these last unveiled professions. Anyway, April 1st rolled around, and they did an update to the game where they added like an Apache helicopter to Guild Wars 1, and there were all these SWAT guys running around, and they gave us all these like ridiculous weapons. It was insane. They did all this bonkers stuff, and they revealed a fake class, because this was what we were all so wet in the mouths for. They revealed a fake class, and it was the Commando, and it had all these ridiculous things associated with it, like being able to launch airstrikes at people, firing rocket launchers. There was like this one bit of the trailer where they're just zoomed in on this woman with these massive boobs running, and they're like bouncing slightly. It was kind of an hilarious April Fool's joke. Probably the best April Fool's thing, in my opinion, ArenaNet ever did. It's much better than the little things that they tend to do. Well, okay, SAB, fine. I take it back. I'm wrong. SAB was way better. But this was a huge thing. And so now you're saying, wait, could this be an engineer specialization? Well, I think the name is suited, perhaps. But I don't think we'll be calling in airstrikes. I don't think we'll be getting SWAT outfits and riot gear and stuff, unfortunately. Even though, and a lot of people don't appreciate this either, we actually played as commandos in Guild Wars 1. There was a whole mini-mission they added and everything, where you go back in time, it was spoofing the Terminator in like a big way. It's really cool. The next question is from D. Falk, who says, could we be returning to the Henge of Denravi to return the druids to the world? I keep thinking, too, that the Altar of Gw2 will be involved in freeing the Silvari. So on the second point, yes, this could be true. Now, a lot of people ignore or forget about the powerful stuff we get in Ara Explorable. In Ara Explorable, they really do show us some great things. They have a human character, like, basically ascend and become, like, Lord Odrin and disappear into the mist to look for the gods, who I desperately want to see once again. And they also, and one of the other important parts, is the Forgotten Path, the Forgotten race that we've been dealing with a little bit in the story here. We learn about how the Forgotten had, thousands of years ago, during the previous Dragon's Uprising, they had created this powerful magic altar that could cleanse dragon corruption, and we proved that it still works by cleansing an undead risen chicken and turning it back into just a regular chicken. And so it was kind of a funny part in that respect, but that's huge for the story. That's absolutely huge for the story. And if we are now going into a plot where the Silvari could be getting corrupted by Morgemoth, they have already explained to us that in the universe there is a means for the corruption to be cleansed. And now I'm wondering, since they have also confirmed, look, this was always the idea for the Silvari, they were always going to be minions of another hidden dragon, this was always going to be the thing, were they also then, when they designed Ara Explorable, setting that up for themselves so that they can, in the future, in this expansion perhaps, actually say, alright, this is how we explain the player characters not being corrupted, and that would be interesting. Anyway, the other thing, are we going to return to the Henge of Denravi to return the druids for the world? I don't... okay, the Henge of Denravi is interesting. I've talked about this a little bit on the channel before. In the first game, it was this supposedly magically, like, sealed, wonderful haven that we hid in, and the only way you could access it or find it was, like, by completing, like, these trials, these rituals, and we were racing against the White Mantle to get there first, and of course we succeed, and so it's, like, supposed to be the safe place. But... later on, one of the leaders of the Shining Blade betrayed the Shining Blade, and all of the people that were there, while we were off in the Crystal Desert doing our thing trying to ascend, while we were in the desert, all this stuff off screen happened where these people got stormed by the White Mantle and slaughtered and killed, and the two remaining leaders, Sidra and Evinia, were captured and taken hostage, who we then go to free. So it's supposed to be like this sanctuary, and the idea is in Guild Wars 2, because none of us, the player characters, ever did, like, these rites or whatever, maybe the Henge of Denravi we see, which is kind of a druidic-ish place there in Brisbane Wildlands, perhaps this isn't the real Henge, and maybe there's still a way to find the real Henge and go in there. That's an idea I still like. I think it's a bit of an iffy idea, but I do still like it, and maybe that can be a thing with Morgemoth, right? But I don't think we'll return the druids to the world. I think it would be a crime if we didn't get more information about the druids. Before Guild Wars 2 came out, the Maguma Jungle, the mystery behind the Maguma Jungle, the coolest stuff to speculate, in my opinion, about the Maguma Jungle, was the mystery of the druids. So, and of course, it's kind of interesting that this expansion is giving us a specialization known as, what's that? The Druid. So, for those of you out of the loop, the Druids were basically a group of humans. This was this was after the gods had come and all this stuff, so it was actually fairly recent history, I suppose. It was about 1,000 years, I guess, just over 1,000 years before the events of Guild Wars 1. If you consider that recent history, I guess, you know, in the full time scale of things, it's pretty much recent history. Anyway, so there were these humans that went to live in the jungle and seemed to have get very good at living in the jungle. The Maguma Jungle was always supposed to be very inhospitable, and they learned all kinds of things about navigating the jungle, just like we may be soon with the mastery system. One thing I haven't talked about with the mastery system is in Guild Wars 1 with the Maguma, we always saw people like building bridges and stuff, growing bridges, vine bridges. Well, this could totally be a thing with the masteries, right? That sounds totally in line. Anyway, so you had the druids, they lived in the jungle, and the idea was they wanted to be like at one with nature. The Guild Wars 1 wiki says that it is said they are devout followers of Melandru, though these are only rumours, I'm not quite sure where that comes from. Anyway, according to the history of Tyria, they were forced out of the jungles in the long distant past by other humans, and they were last seen just before 982 after the Exodus. So they were last seen, basically these are a group of people that were in the jungle last seen about 100 years before the events of Guild Wars 1, okay? So about 100 years before the game started, these people disappeared. They mysteriously vanished. And when we finally got to interact with them, even if just a little in the game, they had sort of become spirits. They had like transcended their bodies and become one with nature. And they look like oak hearts. I doubt if they come back in Guild Wars, like spiritual oak hearts. I doubt if they come back in Guild Wars 2 that they'll have the same appearance. But yeah, that's the idea. Like, why did they do this? How did they do this? Who have they become? What are their capabilities now? What did they learn in the jungle? And if there's all this stuff about Glint hiding a secret in the jungle and so much stuff to do with Morgemoth, perhaps Primordus, even if only a little, they must have known something, right? And this is a perfect opportunity to explore that. As I said, the long-standing thing about the Maguma jungle has been this mystery of the Druids. We're going to it in a Guild Wars 2 expansion. Is it time? Is it time for us to learn things? Okay, wow, I talked way too long on that question. The next one's from Mina Fed the Unicorns. She said, and this is only a quick one, about specializations. I just ran AC. It reminded me of something. Remember Hodgkins? He's dual-wielding scepters. Maybe that's a hint for the new Elementalist specialization, because that's one thing everyone was always wondering about. Absolutely, I have refrained in that specialization video from speculating too much about taking existing weapons and like putting them in new slots. Just because I feel like now with their statements, we have another question as well about the spear. Rumen Stoinev said, by the way, why didn't you think a single occasion of adding the spear, like for Warrior, for example? It's because they did confirm, despite the concept art, despite what it looks like Ritlock has in that trailer, they did say that spears, like above land spears, aren't really going to be a thing, I'm pretty sure. So, like, this is weird to me now. It's like, okay, well, if they're not doing that, are they going to, like, let people have focus in the main hand? It's something I've openly mused about in private, but I don't know anymore. Yes, he's dual-wielding scepters. I think dual-wielding scepters would be awesome. In terms of the Elementalist, honestly, if they get a specialization, they still have attunements, okay? Because it would be so much work to completely change the attunement system. It would just revamp so much stuff about the class and probably be a bit too much. But okay, if they still have attunements, I think Elementalist is the most likely class of them all to get just an offhand rather than anything else, because even just an offhand on the Elementalist is 8 skills, because it's 2 per attunement. And so yeah, allowing them to have a scepter in their offhand too, that would be amazing, and they could do all kinds of cool stuff like that with the other classes also. But it's hard to speculate right now, isn't it? But I think it's a good idea, and something I didn't bring up before. Radio Video 441 says, what do you think about Morgemoth not being in the trailer? Or any of the speeches at PAX at all? I do think he won't be available at the beginning, and we'll get another season or so of Living Story before we kill it. This is an interesting idea. Now, really consider this for a second. Line of thinking for me first is that they didn't talk about Morgemoth, they didn't show Morgemoth, because they don't want to spoil things. One of the things that was very upsetting to me with Guild Wars 2's initial release was that first trailer showed Zaitan flying around and kind of spoiled the money shot the big bit at the end. In the end, the Zaitan stuff was so botched anyway, I don't mind too much, but I do think in principle it's not a great idea. And I guess Morgemoth's dragon face is a part of the logo, right? So that does suggest we could be able to kill him, but they haven't outright said it. And it is an interesting idea to me that they'll push us in this story right to the cusp of killing Morgemoth, and then say, yes, he will die in the living world. Now, I don't know how the community would take that. We're going to have a lot of people in the community returning to the game who haven't really experienced much of the living world, haven't experienced whether it's good or not, especially in its most current form. So many opinions people have about living world are, like, incredibly outdated. It's very high quality, good stuff. It just comes out a little bit too slow. And so I do think they could still justifiably do a really exciting, compelling kill on Morgemoth in the living world. And this would be a way to stop everyone flooding off after the expansion's over, right? You know, you really drag them in with some great story, and there is some kind of decent conclusion. You know, think about the way Guild Wars 2 launched, where we had kind of the personal story, and it ended on a pretty high note. It ended with the cleansing of ore and stuff. But then there was also the matter of tackling Zaitan, and that was sort of the dungeon-ish side of things. Well, what if they do something like this again? It would be ballsy. It would be really risky, but it would show that they have a lot of faith in the living world strategy, and it would, you know, it would make their community have to stick about for it. And I think that what I'm talking about right now is an idea that a lot of people will detest. Crazy idea, controversial idea. Depends on so many things as to whether I'd be on board with it, but there's a world where it could work, in my opinion. Alright guys, there you go, that's the last question. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below this time. That's where I'll be grabbing questions for the next video from, and maybe sooner than you think, because of course there are just so many going on. I'm interested in checking out your discussion about what we talked about here. Anyway, thanks guys, have a great evening. I will see you tomorrow.